Welcome everyone to the OM System OM1 Complete Camera Guide. My name is John Gringo, and I have a very good class for you on this OM1, the first of the new OM System cameras. Now, those of you who have been with Olympus for a while kind of know what you're getting into for the most part. We do have a very capable, very technologically advanced camera. If you're new to the OM system, well, I guess we're kind of all new to the OM system since it's transitioned over from Olympus. But if you're new to the Olympus or OM system, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised by what you have in this wonderful little package. There's a lot going on in here. There is a number of features that are going to be able to help you out in a lot of different ways. They have revamped their entire menu system, which has put me to a lot of work to revamp the class, because everything's been moved around. And if you feel a little lost on your new camera here, I can understand that. I have felt that myself, but I think I have everything organized and everything in order, so it's all going to be very easy to learn. So in this class, let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going through all the different sections that are going to really take you through this entire camera from the beginning to the end. We're going to start off with some simple, very important controls, and we're going to dig deeper and deeper into what this camera has to offer. And so this class is designed to be watched through chronologically first time around, but if you want to review spot sections to refresh yourself on what's particularly going on that particular feature or set of features or section, yeah, feel free to just kind of pop around. But the first time, we're going to be kind of going in a certain order. We're going to start off with a little introduction, then we're going to go through a few basics just to make sure that everybody's up to speed on what we're working with here. And then we get into the good stuff. Exposure is the first topic here. And then we get into focusing. Both of these two are really important topics, and there's a lot to talk about in these sections. And then we talk about the drive or sequence options in here. And there is a lot of fun stuff in here for sure. Then we're going to do a tour of the camera, the rest of the buttons and dials, see what they do. We're going to look at the display options for the viewfinder and the monitor. There's a lot of helpful tools that you can turn on there. The Super Control Panel is a shortcut to a lot of the most important features. We're going to have a special section just on shooting movies. There's a lot of things that are different, and it's a very capable camera. We're going to look at all the connections to the camera, everything that plugs in and hooks up to the camera. We'll take a quick overview of some of the lenses, give you some recommendations on those as well. And then the next several sections are on each of the different tabs within the menu system. As I say, this is a revamped menu system, so there's lots to talk about in there. And then finally, my field setup guide. And this is going to give you some recommendations on how to set the camera up for a variety of different types of shooting. Now, when it's all said and done, you're going to be an expert in this camera. You're going to know where all the buttons are. You're hopefully going to have the camera all customized to the way you like it to work. That's one of the things I'm going to talk a lot about in here, is about getting all the various buttons customized according to your particular needs. There's lots of options, and I'm going to give you some good tips on how to do that and what to do, depending on what's important to you. Now, as we go through this class, there's a lot of information, and sometimes there's a lot of information kind of buried in the menu that we're going to talk about in the second half of the class. And I might give you a menu reference. For instance, if you want to customize a particular feature, I'll tell you where you can go in the menu and customize it, because I know there are plenty of you who like to skip ahead and make that change right away. Others of you, maybe you're not sure about making that change yet. Well, we will get to that when we get to the menu section. You'll have another chance to make that change, whatever that happens to be. Now, as we're buried deep in the menu, I might be referring back to earlier parts of the class where we explained a particular feature in a little bit more full detail. And so sometimes I'll be referring you forwards and sometimes backwards. That's how this class works. All right, the OM1, classic name with Olympus and now OM system, that is the priority in this particular class. Composition, lighting, all of that sort of stuff is really important in photography. But in this class, we're just talking about this camera. And so this class is one of many that you might need if you want to become a great photographer. And so we are going to be concentrating just on this camera, not on the accessories that hook up or on a lot of the other things in photography. Now, my particular bent on teaching here is I want to teach you how to do things manually and on your own to get the highest quality images. There's a lot of things that this camera can do where it automates results for you. Some of them are pretty awesome, actually. I'll show you plenty of examples and ways that you can use those, but I'm going to really be concentrating on how you can do this yourself, because the camera does give you a lot of great options for manual control, and I want to show you how those features work. And finally, I don't know how much information you know. I do know that we have a wide variety of students who take these classes. Some of them have been shooting these style of cameras for many years. Others are brand new to it. So I'm going to kind of err on the side of explaining new things if they happen to be even a little bit on the new side. Now, this camera does come with a reasonable instruction manual. It's not the most exciting thing to go through, but there is some additional information in there that is not going to be in this particular class. In this class, I'm trying to cover maybe 99% of the users out there in 99% of their uses for this camera. There is a number of particular details, compatibility issues, limitations, and other information that you might need in that instruction manual. So if you want to see that as a further diving into this camera, I encourage you to do that. I do that with all my cameras because I have to for this class. But sometimes on your own, you just need a little bit more information, and that might be in there. But I'm going to be trying to cover everything that most photographers are probably going to need with this camera. Now let's talk a little bit about Olympus history, because that is where this camera essentially comes from. Olympus is obviously one of those most famous names in photography as far as camera manufacturers. They've been around for a long time. They kind of specialized, in my opinion, on small, high-quality cameras. They really kind of made that part of their trademark signature style of cameras. They've had a number of different lens mounts, although not nearly as many of the other manufacturers. They've stayed pretty true to a particular lens mount, which I like that. They're dedicated to a lens mount, and they don't go changing it willy-nilly every time some new technology comes along. And so they've been working with this Micro Four Thirds system for quite a while. Now, as you can see on this list here, Olympus recently sold off the imaging division to Japan Industrial Partners. And so this new OM system has its own company dedicated to making cameras, whereas before it was part of Olympus, which also makes a number of other devices, probably most notably medical devices, scanning microscopes and things like that. And now the camera division is kind of all off on its own. Now, the OM1 name is a classic name with Olympus. This is a very famous camera that was originally introduced in 1972, and it was available in various iterations of it until 1988. It was originally called the M1. Now, this could be for the designer of the camera, or it could be to mimic Leica M1, M2, M3 cameras, because they wanted to make a small SLR style, whereas Leica was making a small rangefinder. Well, they got into some copyright problems with Leica on that, and they decided to add an O at the start of it, and then it was become the OM1. And so that's what it's been reborn as. So this Olympus OM1, the original one, was created by Olympus, and it was built in their Olympus imaging department. And that imaging department has since been sold off to Japan Industrial Partners. Now they've placed it into this division that nobody's ever heard of. And then that is where we get the company name OM Digital Solutions. And so you might see the maker of this referred to as the OMDS, and it's OM Digital Solutions. And from there, the brand or system of this camera is the OM system. So I think most people, when they say, what type of camera is it? Technically, it's an OM Digital Solutions product, but I think most people are just going to call it an OM system camera. And this particular model is, of course, the OM1. And so I know there's a lot of different names, but I thought it'd be good to let you know kind of about the history and where all these names come from. All right, as far as the camera's care and handling, there are a lot of warnings in the instruction manual. Let me just kind of summarize it very quickly. The camera has extremely good weatherproofing, and we're going to be talking about that a number of times in this class. but still it has its limitations, so you do need to be careful with how you handle it. They do recommend using the Olympus and OM system accessories, and that's generally true. I think you can use a wide variety of lenses on it. You can hook up different types of flash units. I kind of prefer to stay with the original manufacturer when it comes to flashes as far as communication. If you're working with lighting gear in a studio, doesn't really matter there. If you're just synchronizing things, use whatever you want there. I tend to like to stay with the name brand manufacturer when it comes to batteries as well. There are third-party batteries that you can sometimes find on the cheap. They tend to be on the cheap in quality as well. And so generally I would stick with the OM system equipment for this, with some rare exceptions to lighting in the studio and lenses. Now there's always one goofy thing in the instruction manual that I like to pull out, and just want to let you know that OM system has said they request that you do not lick the battery. I know we were all really wanting to do that, so it's nice to see that written down in the instruction manual. Now, as far as the construction of this camera, it's a well-built camera, magnesium alloy body. That's pretty common these days. As far as the weather sealing on this, it fits into something called an IP53 standard, and this has to do with its ingress protection as to what type of dust and water and how powerful of water. Is it water dripping or water sprayed at it? What angles is the water being sprayed at it? And in general, this is the type of camera that's going to be pretty fine out in a steady rain for quite a while. You could be out there potentially for hours. I would probably try to get a rain cover if I knew I was going to be out there for hours with it, but it's quite likely to be able to withstand that. The dust rating is kind of interesting because it's not that it blocks all the dust out, it's just that it can keep working if any dust gets in there. Works very good in cold temperatures, and not that it's on my immediate to-do list, but if I was climbing Mount Everest, this would probably be the top of my consideration as to what camera to bring. Relatively small, high quality, lots of features, and does really well in some adverse environments. And so, yeah, this might be my Everest camera if I did Everest, which I don't have any plans to do. All right, the shutter life on this one is also really good. It's got a 400,000 cycle rating. So that's how many clicks of the shutter it is likely to last, or at least been tested to last. It could go well beyond that, depending on how you use your camera. And the fact that we also use an electronic shutter on this camera may prolong the life even further. So keep that in mind. All right, let's make sure that your camera and my camera is ready for this class here. You're going to need a battery. This is going to charge via the USB port on the side of the camera. It takes about 2.5 hours to charge. You're going to get anywhere from 400 to 500 shots, depending on what type of viewfinder you use and how you focus and things like that. You're only going to need a lens on there. Want to make sure you have a memory card in there so that you can take practice photos. Go ahead and turn the camera on, which is what I'm going to do right now. And program mode's not my favorite mode, but you know, it's an easy, simple one. It's a good one for testing the camera. And let's just make sure our camera works here. Got the little beep and the focus confirmation. And if any of you are having issues, get a memory card in there, charge the battery, try to take care of any of those basic issues so that you're ready for the rest of the class. Now here at the beginning of the class, I do like to check to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page in the instruction manual, if you will, and that is with the firmware check. Firmware is the software that runs all the operations on the camera, and occasionally there are updates, and there's been a couple of updates so far with this camera, and I am going to be teaching this class from a standpoint of firmware version 1.3. So if you want to go into the menu, you can take a look and see what firmware you have. Let me go ahead and show you how to do this if you have not played around in the menu looking for different things. What you're going to do is hit the menu button, and you can use this little control to go through the different tabs. Now this one goes through each and every tab. You can turn the front dial and go through the main tabs and go a little bit more quickly over to the wrench. And this has several pages in here. And we want to go into the last page, and the last item, almost second to last item, the firmware version, and it says here that we have version 1.3 for the body. The lens also happens to be 1.3, but that's kind of a separate issue for right now. We're just talking about the firmware version of the camera. So at some point in the future, it's possible that OM System is going to do an update to the firmware, and they're going to fix a bug, or they're going to add a feature or something else to it. Well, that is something that you can go to Olympus and have updated with your camera. Now, the process for doing this is you are going to do it with your camera connected to the computer. You're going to use the USB cable, and you're going to need to download the OM Workplace software. This is a little program that lives on your computer that communicates with your camera. Now, this gets changed and updated from time to time as well, and so you might need to update that software on your computer so that you can update the firmware on your camera. Now, a few little tips that I have learned in updating my cameras is you will open up OM Workplace, look for the camera menu option, and do an update, and then it will communicate with the camera once you are connected up with the USB cable. You're going to want to probably take the memory cards out. It tends to work best that way. And when you connect your camera up to the computer, make sure it says storage. There's different ways that the camera can communicate with a computer. It can download, or it can work with a software program, and you want it in the storage category. And I found it best not to use a USB hub. You want to be plugged in directly to the computer. It may not be picking up information properly otherwise. All right. The other thing that happens is sometimes people, sometimes myself, get to play around with the camera, and we start making a lot of changes. And as I go through the class, things look a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset my camera essentially back to the factory default settings that it had when I opened up out of the box. Now, if you've changed your camera and you've made customizations, that's fine. That's great. Just be aware of what you have done. If you don't like what you've done, or you want to go back and start fresh again, well, you can just kind of follow what I'm going to do. And that is to dive into the menu and to go into the Reset Initialize Settings. Now, you could do a basic reset, which is just kind of your basic camera things, your exposure and focus settings. Or you could do a full reset, which basically turns everything back in the menu back to its original default setting, which is what I'm going to do right now. So follow along. All right, diving into the menu, and we are already on the wrench icon, which we can change by the front dial back and forth. And we want to go to I think it's the 6th page in here. We have Reset and Initialize Settings. So if we wanted to do a basic reset, we would press OK right here, but we want to go down to Initialize All Settings, and we're going to press OK here. And this wants us to confirm, so we're going to go up to select Yes, and then we're going to press OK. And it just does it. It's very, very quick. And so now my camera is back to the factory default settings. So if you just open your camera out of the box, well, they should match each other very closely. All right, one last thing here for the introduction, and that is that if you have purchased the full class, you will probably want to download this PDF. Now, what this is it's a couple of things. It's got the entire menu in here. And so what this is it's a nice visual layout. I'm a very visual person, and I'm guessing a lot of you are as well. And so this allows me to see everything in the menu system very quickly and easily. Now, on the first couple pages, I also have recommended settings in here as a good place to start when setting up your camera. And then a few pages later in here, I have the same thing, only they're blank, so you can add in your own settings or your own notes or anything else. And so there's other information in here about working with the camera. Very importantly, I have a page in here on the compatibility of the lenses with some features and weatherproofing. And so if you really want to know how things are going to work and how compatible they are, that's also some help. We'll talk about that in the lens section of this class itself. So this is something that you may want to have in electronic form on your phone or your iPad, or maybe you want to print it out like me because you're old school and you want to just put it in your camera bag or look at it yourself. So be aware that that is available with the full purchase of the class. All right, that's your introduction. We're just going to get going and talk about more and more stuff on this camera. We'll see you there.